What are the most common mistakes that athletes make when pitching a sponsor? And what are companies actually looking for when deciding whether or not to sign a sponsorship deal? Well, those are some of the questions you will get the answer to in this episode of the For Athletes series. So stay with me as I meet a real sport marketing expert from the corporate world who's been dealing with sponsorships for the past 30 years. This is Athlete Story, and I'm your host, Anja Bolbjerg. If you're a world-class athlete or simply want to tap into world-class sports wisdom, I suggest you subscribe to my channel right now so that you get notified whenever I upload a new video for you. Today's guest is former global marketing director for the Carlsberg Breweries Keld Strudahl. He took the Carlsberg brand into sports marketing way back in the early 1990s, and then for the following 22 years together with the marketing team, he fulfilled and nurtured their international sport marketing strategy. Now, for the past 6 years, he's been acting as an independent sports marketing strategist and consultant through his own company called Brand Activators. He uses his unique experience to help sports properties, that's what you call things like the UEFA, international clubs, federations and athletes on the one side, and then big brands and corporations who need advice in executing a sponsor strategy on the other side. Now, I was lucky to meet Keld in one of his favorite places on a beautiful day in this little rowing club of Humlebæk, just north of Copenhagen, Denmark. A short break he had just after the World Championships in ice hockey and the Champions League, which are just some of the clients that he's working with. So if you're ready, let's go to Humlebæk Row Club. Come on, follow me. Welcome to the show, Athlete Story. You're just back from World Championships in ice hockey.
It's been a couple of busy months, a planning circuit of ice hockey, which sort of like peaked with a month of heavy activities. Parallel, I had to do the Danish Championship in football, and then right after I went to Kiev to the UEFA Champions League. Not only my favorite team, Liverpool, played against Real Madrid. Unfortunately, we lost. Other than that, it was great. I had some great meetings and had good chats with UEFA, which I was actually involved from the beginning in 1993-94. It's amazing how that tournament has developed into not only the most successful sports property, but also probably the most successful money machine in the world.
So you work mostly with big events and properties like the UEFA brand?
What I do mostly is I advise sports federations, clubs, the likes of Barcelona, the likes of Champions League, and things like that. You sometimes are surprised about that. It's a great product. They play fantastic football, they have a fantastic tournament, but sometimes they're not very good at what actually the commercial side of it. Mm-hmm. That's where I step in and say, okay, well, shouldn't I help you either optimize, maximize, get the best out of your sports property? On the other side, I also, many times for my former company like Carlsberg and anything else, I step in and say, okay, how can we activate your brand better once you have signed your sponsorship contract?
In a way, you work on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I do, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And which one I like most? Honestly, I like both. I really do. Originally, when I left Carlsberg, which is now 6 years ago, my whole idea was to take what I learned from brand marketing, brand strategy, turn it into sports marketing. I had the idea that actually most companies probably need my help in terms of executing and activating sponsorships.
When you're out there to these events, what is it that you do? Because I imagine most of the job will be beforehand, right?
Yeah, it's a combination. I mean, and each event, each sponsorships or sports marketing property are very different, particularly with my role as a consultant and advisor to different properties. It can be from the ice hockey, which was primarily planning the marketing strategy, planning the ticket strategy. And then once it came into operation, I turned into being part of the operation machine, which is not really what I do normally. But given that this was the biggest event in Denmark ever, plus the fact that way back I had quite a bit of experience in operation. And mind you, I've been involved in this game for 30 years and I think I got 14 Olympic events behind me. And wow. Same with World Championship in football and many other things. So I offer my help to the organization, said if I can help somehow, So
that's your superpower.
Yeah, exactly. Somehow, yeah. And I learned a lot from the athletes as well, because I think it's fantastic to be with all these different athletes, and some are easier and some are better than other ones. But it's a great world. And when I left Carlsberg, that was kind of my idea that I instead of having it for 50% of the time, now I want to go 100% of the time. Yeah. Now I'm 6 years down the road, and they seem to be doing quite well, so it's okay.
Well,
Yeah.
there's definitely use for it, and especially like the whole landscape, I imagine, around marketing and sports marketing must be so different now with all these new media. Well,
Yes.
new now, but compared to 10 years ago, it's new, right?
True.
And so there's got to be a lot of opportunities and also a lot of confusion if you've been used to doing it the same way.
Yeah. It is a fragmented world. It's there's a lot of opportunities. There's also a lot of traps which you could get into, which you don't really understand. And I think also for me, it's a learning curve. I mean, when I started this, it was just about getting. I used to joke about there's always 10 points, so to speak. And it's all about getting as much media exposure as possible. It's about getting as much tickets as possible, and then try and calculate it out. And you could literally list not even 10 points when you sold a sponsorship. If you look at today, unfortunately, I still think a lot of people do it like that. And that's not really my opinion. That's what I'm trying to take away and say, well, we need to do it more differently. It's still the mantra for many sports federations, athletes. It's also still a mantra for many corporations who buy into sponsorship that, okay, it's all about exposure, it's all about hospitality, and that's it. I always say to people when I go into to discussions with federations, for instance, I keep saying, try and close your eyes and take the imagination. You don't have any TV coverage. What will you do then? And the room is completely silent because no one is not used to have big TV contracts. But that's nevertheless the fact today, except from football, to a certain extent a couple of other sports. Most of them doesn't have big TV contracts anymore. So they need to come up with new ideas of how to develop themselves. That's a challenge for everybody, including myself also. Yeah. But you should do that because that's the way you should force yourself to think, in my opinion.
I know from the inside, having both been part of the Freeride World Tour as an athlete, and then I did 1 year freelance with them as well. And it's like a private tour where they've said, okay, we do the media production, we don't need the TV. If they need us, we can tell whatever, how it works. But that could be a strategy for...
And I think it's a good strategy, particularly with the kind of new media, as you say, which is not new anymore, but still it's looked upon as new media. Because if you take the old ski world, where you're coming from, if you take the classical alpine ski world, my prediction is that within 5-10 years, they're going to suffer extremely because they're still depending on a few big countries like Austria and Switzerland, to a certain extent France and Italy, but not Denmark, who still put quite a little bit on national broadcast TV. But, nobody watches TV at 10 o'clock in the morning or whenever the athlete's on, unfortunately. Well, I think, like the Pro Ride Tour and some of the more upcoming type of new sports in skiing, they have got the message because it's a cliche, but they were starving, so they need to come up with something else. Well, the other guys are still relatively big fat guys sitting there having the TV contract. They don't care about it. But these guys, they are really proactive, very curious about what to do. And I think the Pro Tour is Pro Freeride Tour is a perfect example of that, where you really manage to do your own TV, send it out, and I don't know exactly the amount of money they get for it, but I think it's a very nice concept, which I have to admire really well. I think it's great. I wish more will do that, to be honest.
Yeah. Now, I have been involved with Olympic sports and Olympic athletes, and I heard an interview in Canada where they referred to Olympians as the cheap labor of the Olympic Committee.
Okay.
Because, everybody around seemed to get their salary and their pay and their whatever. Yeah. But the athletes are pretty much starving. So what can you do as an Olympic athlete to try and become worth more so that you're attractive to a sponsor deal? Or
it's a very good question. I don't think I have the right answer, but I have some answers for you, and I think I have some ideas about it, because it is tough. I mean, because and I hate to say this word, but it is a lot about personal branding. You need to, and I know it's a tough balance, because you need to focus on that you have to be good at what, and you need to beat the guys. And again, if you're number 34 or something like that, then of course the interest for you as a product, because the product is about who you perform and you win medals, then sponsors say, okay, great, that's a medal, so we can use him or her to something, either advertising campaign or whatever. Whereas if you're not there, you need to look into yourself as a brand, and how can you help a particular sponsor or corporation being together somehow. And that's not easy because also most companies today are extremely skeptical, critical about how they take upon new sponsorships. So if an athlete if I take my old job, if an athlete came to me and asked for support, I would immediately ask me, okay, what can you deliver? And at that time, many athletes, I think the athletes have become much better today, but at that time, many athletes were a little bit like, well, I'm good at skiing, I'm good at badminton, I'm good at tennis, whatever. But my point was, okay, fine, but if you're not top 3, what is my return? What do I get? And most of the time, they were numb. They didn't know what to say. And I think many good example of that is that if an athlete come in and has the opportunity to show that actually they can do more, either like you do yourself, physical programs with the HR department or appearances to different conferences, but it also requires a lot of skills. I mean, I'm also from the sports world myself originally, and I know not everybody is capable of doing that sort of like extrovertness and they have to do. But I'm sorry to say, but that's a little bit the name of the game today. It's not just about being good at your sport. You need to be good at selling yourself, brand yourself.
Like you're a bit of an entrepreneur as an athlete.
In a way, yeah. You need to, and I think I think it's amazing when I see that, because you're right, they are kind of cheap labor in many ways. And lucky-wise, I think many governments start supporting and putting more money behind it, so it's not just about cheap labor. But of course, everything comes to an end at one stage. You experience that yourself also. And you need to find out how you balance that work. But of course, as a coach, I always see, you should be focused on the training, because that's what will drive you to the good results. Yeah. But you also probably need to have a little bit like, I mean, rock stars, pop stars, they have an entourage. They have a manager, they have trainers, whatever else, sync trainers, whatever, and you need that also as an athlete today.
Yeah, so maybe that's an investment that you should do pretty early on and say, okay, it's another cost from a budget that's very little,
it's very little,
to non-existent. But maybe that's just like the seed that you need.
I think almost, probably the wrong word to say, but I think it's about it. Once you have first of all, like an athlete, you know that you need to set your goals, you need to set your objectives, your mission on what you want to achieve, and that's fine if you say I want to be number 1 or number 2 or 3 for that. That's fine, but alongside that, you also need to say, okay, fine, I need X amount of money. How do I get that? Okay, is that by from day 1 go to a wealthy guy or a company where I say, okay, I can help you with X, Y, and Z. I think that's the best way to do it. It's not easy, and it's a sales job, and we all know that. It's also in my business there. I need to be selling as well. I can't just sit here and think everybody's coming to me and say, I want you to help me. So it's a tough work. It is tough. Sometimes a little bit unfair, I think, because you athletes give so much back to society in many aspects, but there's also many. And if you look upon it today, you have football up here, which is undescribable why it's so successful for many reasons, even though I'm very much involved in that. But you can't touch that. But you need to think about what else there is. And there, I think there is a massive opportunities, but it's also it's a red ocean. There's many working and trying to get in there. So you need to find ways to go to the blue ocean, to use that analogy. That's really important. Yeah. So that's
ways to differentiate yourself, I imagine. Because if we all come with the same sponsor proposal, it's...
Yes. And that's a little bit back to my 10 points or 5 points. Many comes with the same. Say, okay, I can give you X amount of branding, exposure. I can give you X amount of this and that. You need to think out of the box. Yeah. And I can't take a good example at the moment, but I just remember when people start, and particularly individuals, actually start coming around and say, okay, well, I can probably offer you a session where you take your top management to a particular club, whether it's skiing or it's sailing, whatever. At that time, I think that's where I think, wow, okay, this guy's got something. I can actually give you a good example, because we were sponsor of the Danish Olympic sailing team, which was a little bit separate out, and they were supported by Team Denmark, but they were also a little bit individual. And when we signed the deal, we signed a little bit out of the Team Denmark sponsorship. We said to them clearly, yes, we know we're not going to get very much exposure. You're not the biggest sport in Denmark. but you are a great bunch of guys, so you need to help us how we can develop things together. So we developed everything from, get on match race, which at that time was first time ever, We had some of our clients out on the boat, learning how to sail the boat, all about the psychological, because these athletes, like you skiers, they're extremely powerful in terms of their determination and how they train and stuff like that. And I think it's probably one of the most successful sponsorship ever, even though it was a small one.
Yeah.
But it was great because there was dedication. And I think one point which we just talked about also when I was in Kiev, is the engagement factor is so important today. How do you engage yourself with your sports property and the sponsor? How do they engage instead of just having this, you got 10 minutes of exposure, fine, or you get 100 tickets for a final. That's also important, but you need to find that engagement factor. Yeah. That's important.
If you can be part of a story, like mutual story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's important.
I can come with another example actually. Just thinking of it now. Yeah. When I qualified for the Olympics for the first time in mogul skiing, there a Danish journalist, rest in peace, because he's no longer with us.
Okay.
But he got this idea for. It was a union. They wanted to test sponsoring, sports sponsoring. So they didn't know anything about. They just had the example of another union who had great success with the Danish team handball. Yeah. And so he said, "Well, I know this young athlete. She's probably cheap, and you can make some experience into what sports sponsorship can do. Yeah. So that can be another angle. You're not as expensive as a single person, and the company can make." Some experiences. And they ended up measuring that 2% of the Danish population knew what mogul skiing was before. Yeah. And after it was 50%. Wow. So it was successful for not a lot of money.
And they got some interaction with you also, and they could.
Because they had like a members magazine. Yeah. So there was always a little story.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Oh, wow. Yeah. No, but that's about. It is about finding this. Particularly for individual athletes, which is not easy, I admit that. But I think it is to try and think out of the box and find a point of difference where, in marketing you tell about USP, what is your unique selling point? And you need to find that within your own brand, so to speak. And I think actually, I haven't thought very much about what I'm saying now, but I think actually if you turn it around and you say, okay, well, today the world is so fragmented because also marketing companies, that's actually where I think many of the big properties, such as football, not necessarily football, but some of those just below, they will suffer because nobody has that kind of money they ask for just to put on one thing. Whereas most brands today, even the big brands like the Coca-Cola, Apple, and so on, they think very much on small pockets. So I think if one athlete could find a way of get into that one of those small pockets, then there's money for them because they need it. But again, you need to find the storyline. You need to decide what can I do which makes your brand successful in that particular area. Yeah. Whether it's a social media story following Anja for the next 10 months on something, fine. Or it's come to 10 presentations or speeches with Anja, whatever. Then I think there is something, and that's maybe where there's a better chance for many athletes today than just go up against the big boys, because the big boys will most likely always be there, and they are still extremely conservative in the way they market themselves. Yeah, yeah. And why do you do that? Well, because TV is still the biggest contributor, so they, in a way, they don't really care too much about how being innovative and thinking out of the box. For me, it's I always said, I live very much from a small sort of like sentence called Cairo. That's all about that you need to be consistent in what you do. You need to try and consist yourself in what you do, and you need to have some kind of awareness in what you do. Relevance is really important because many times when I was in my old job, you had athletes come up and say, okay, well, I'm a marathon runner. I want you to be sponsored with you. So I say, think about it. Carlsberg, a beer, sponsoring an athlete in marathon. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. You can have it in the name. Yeah, but I'm an alcohol brand. You shouldn't be on mine. And that's sometimes still somewhere people think, why do you think about it? Think relevance in what you do. And then be innovative in what you do. That's also that's the I in what I'm saying. And finally, the organization also. You need to be organized. You need to find a way of organize yourself so you can also deliver what you are promising, so to speak. That's also sometimes an issue for both parts, as a matter of fact. But you also need to ask demands from the organization you become sponsor with and say, okay, well, if we have a partnership, you also need to set aside either a person or a certain amount of resources to make sure that actually we can bring it together, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. So that's, for me, very important that these things happen.
What do you think of the idea of athletes grouping together to make like this? You have a sailing athlete and a skiing athlete, and they have different seasons, but still kind of in the same image of being outdoors. And could there be an idea of grouping together and proposing like a package of?
That's a good idea, I think. No, honestly, I mean, I would again. Find the company who you think could do things like that. Then I think it could be fantastic.
Because I think that could take away a little bit of the vulnerability of sponsoring just one athlete.
Yeah.
Like with the chances of injuries and.
That's also that's all. No, and I think if you have the right company, I think I can just think about it anymore. But I think it would be great to, if you are in skiing, you are in sailing, you are maybe in running and other sport, badminton or tennis, whatever. I will, from a company point of view, I think it would be great if you could offer, say, to the employee or to your business contact, wow, I got 4 different setup of athletes. I think that'd be fantastic. I think just thinking about this now, I think there's an interesting story also. I'm sure you heard about this, but there's many sort of like entrepreneurs who now are thinking about, well, if I come to me, if I had my daughters and they want to be good at tennis, then they offer them special tennis lessons with a star. So if it's Wozniacki, she's probably a little bit too far. But anyway, so they bridge the two. And the many private people today, because they are so it's all about being individual. And now I'm being a little bit full of them. They've been very ambitious on their kids' behalf. They hire these people to do the very things. I just thinking out loud now. Why don't the athletes do that? I mean, why don't you say, okay, well, if there is 4 athletes, okay, within the company, okay, there's probably 30 young bright kids who want to be a ski star. So why don't they hire Anja to teach them to be more competitive, be more skiing, whatever, instead of having a company out in the world who's taking a fee for doing that. I think that could be a great way of doing sponsorship, perhaps. Yeah. And then you can offer that maybe in sailing as well or something else. Yeah, this could be interesting. For sure.
So what about the role of social media?
Yes.
Because now, like, we have a lot of athletes posting whatever, to keep getting more and more followers, and some have an impressive amount of followers.
Yeah.
And I guess there can be some power in that.
Yeah.
And is that also what, when you talk about traps, is that also what you?
I think it's funny that I still think even though we joked about it's new media, it is still new media. I think there's still so many people, maybe including myself, who doesn't really understand the power of the new media, the social media, the influencer and stuff like that. We did a little bit part in terms of ice hockey where we tried to put the influencer. I think there's traps because you can be sure that there's many of these influencers you hire or you ask to help you out. No, somebody wants to have a lot of money. Some is fairly proud just to be associated with it. But nevertheless, it's still, you need to ask obligations to these people because many times they think themselves as being something which is just a gift to God, so to speak. So I think most athletes today has a strong profile on. But again, I think it's also about being a professional, also having people maybe help you, because I understand how can a 15, 16 years old kid who is focused on trying to be best in a particular sport also have time for that. So he needs to have this organization behind him which helps. But you know that better than anyone. That takes a lot of.
I just watched a movie. It's a basketball player trying to make it, but then some stuff happens and he can't get in the American college system because he somehow is judged as being professional, and then it's not. But what he does then is takes his social media following and gets them all involved, and in a way that's what allows him to take the step into becoming a professional.
Yeah.
Because he's just always walking around with that camera, and that's what we can do today. We can, like back when I was skiing, who would come out and watch us on a early Saturday morning, way out in the mountains? Nobody. But now we have this power to take people with us out there virtually. And of course, that's what's being used more and more.
And I think that's particularly in individual sports like skiing and in other sports, I think it's a fantastic tool we have there because, I'm a little bit, I'm a big fan of skiing, so maybe I'm a little bit pro on that one. But I think, the many videos I've watched, just a small clip of 5 minutes, but I'm amazed how well executed they are, and I follow many freestylers, everything else, because I think it's great. And you can also see it works, and you can see many of particularly the sports brands are really taking that advantage and using it on different social media platforms. I think that's fantastic. I think also, just going back to one of the conservative sports, speaking of that social media thing, you see most big football clubs today, once they've done their match, there's a bunch of guys running out to them on the pitch and tap them on with a GoPro camera or something like that, and then they're running around doing all sort of crazy things. And if you look at the club's website, it's amazing what they do. I mean, did that 2 years ago, people would say, crazy, I mean, don't even do that. And you still see, unfortunately, too many of these football players saying no to it. But I saw in my own club where I work on, FC Copenhagen, they do it quite well, and I think it's great pictures and something which TV cannot provide either.
Okay, so let's say now you're out with the client, and which is a company who's considering whether or not to go into a sponsor deal.
Yeah.
What are the things that you would be looking at mainly?
Well, number one, and I said that many times in our discussion here, our conversation, it's all about relevance. I mean, is it relevant for you, your company, or your product, or your brand, or whatever? That's my first question to any potential client or company I work with, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And it's a very simple question, but you won't believe how many people who had never thought about that. And then, of course, I looked upon, okay, your target group, all the different marketing messages, your target group, relevance, media exposure, other activities you can use with it, and first and foremost also, I mean, what sort of budget do you have? I mean, are you in for buying the big Champions League in football, or are you in for having a small little sponsorship which works really well for you on a particular market? Are you on different platforms, and what can you use it for? That's the thing. And I think one of the things I preach very much when I also do speeches and stuff like that, I think, sponsorship is two things. It is you need to know your facts. You need to understand that there is a return for you in terms of pure cool facts, in terms of the numbers, and money, and stuff like that. But it's also a lot about heart and emotions. And I used to say, and I have to make that change in my own perception, because I used to say, we can measure everything. If you can't measure sponsorship, don't do it. It's not really true, because I think you can measure so many things today, but where sponsorship makes a difference is that it's very much personal, engaging, and it's emotional. And I think that is the success sponsorship still can have among companies and among brands. But you need to get your basic right, so you cannot just go out with something that's completely nuts. But it's also important that you find that engaging, emotional button which you can actively use sponsorship with. So that's some of the things I really ask when I start looking into.
So actually, that gives an extra angle for relevance. Like say you have this brand and you have you want people to feel a certain way with this brand. Either if it's like a clothing brand, you want them to feel prestigious or glamorous or whatever. Then that feeling should go through into the sponsorships that you make and communicate that glamour.
Don't do it. Please don't do it, because I had many places where I come and ask people, and they say, we have the sponsorship in the drawer. We pay 100,000 euros a year. Frank, you don't know what to do with it. And I looked at it and said, well, I understand it, because it's not a match. So either get rid of it or try and figure out how to activate it if you can. If you cannot, then stop the relationship. Many times the trap is, because you get very emotional attached. Either with because you love skiing or you love football, and it's not a bad thing as long as the CEO or the management of this company understand that we also need to make it relevant for my company, not only for me personally, but as also my company for what you do. And I think that's still a question to ask wherever you go, and it's not always being answered very correctly. But otherwise, it is a classical marketing model. You need to always look about your target group, your area of responsibility, the reach of the sponsorship, and all that. All these things need to become part of your mix. And what I think is very important, and many companies doesn't do that their homework. It's about research. You need to research and find out. Select your sponsorship portfolio and say, I want to be involved in X, Y, and Z before you take it. Instead of having these always spontaneous, okay, I met Anja, she's good looking and I like her because she's a good skier, let's do it. It's good for you, but I think from a company point of view, it's not necessarily good. So that's some of the things you need to take into your consideration. And still, unfortunately, many companies doesn't do that.
But there must be some reasons why you want to go in sports sponsorship.
I think there is a group of professional companies who knows why they want to be sponsored. The natural one, of course, the one who is naturally associated with sports, and sports brands and stuff like that. They know exactly why they do it. Then there is a different bunch of companies, including my former company, Carlsberg, who know also why they're doing it. But then there's still a big group of unknowns who doesn't really know exactly why they're doing it. They don't have a strategy for what they're doing, and you need to be a partnership. Yeah. If you can't offer a partnership, don't go there.
What are some of the most common mistakes you see people making when they go looking for a sponsor?
So you mean on the athlete side?
Yeah, on the athlete or team or
Yeah, team. First of all, the most common mistake is that they haven't done their homework. They're not prepared well. So they go into these meetings with a feeling that, okay, well, they should sponsor me because I'm the best gift to this company. But if you ask a question back and say, so why? Most of the time they'll say, just because I'm good or it's my sport. So I think that's the most common mistake people do. And then it's about also that a certain kind of laziness, maybe that's a little bit unfair, but or confidence saying, okay, well, I'm a good skier or I'm a good tennis player, but frankly, I don't really care about what else it takes for me to become partner with this company. So it's a little bit of ignorance. Not saying that they're bad people, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying they are a little bit sort of ignorance in the sense of, or naive in the sense of what does it take for me to come in. And it's coming back to our earlier conversation. It's all about selling. You need to sell yourself on a very, very strong performance, because otherwise you won't get it. So I think that's...
And you might as well learn, because that's going to be like that for the rest of your life.
It's it's in any aspect of what I'm doing today also. It's not easy either, and everybody knows that it takes... You need to put yourself up there and make sure that you have your 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is, and you need to perform like hell, or not like hell, like the best you can do. And that's really important. What else is not understanding, but it's a little bit of preparation. They don't understand the business, right? They haven't really thought about what is it actually the business do. I mean, classical thing, today it's so easy. You have corporate websites, go in and find out, what exactly it stands for. Why is it they could become a potential sponsor for me? What is the link? I used to say when I do my things, put relevance together, find out, on one side they have X, Y, and Z values. Does these values compare to what you stand for and how you perform and things like that? It's simple stuff, but unfortunately most of the time people either tend to forget it, are lazy about it, or doesn't really understand it. So it takes a lot of preparation to go into sports. And also that's another thing which today is very a buzzword, but networks. You need to start finding your networks. Make sure that you know someone who knows someone, because if you call in and say, hi, I'm Anja or I'm Kjell, I want to have a sponsor, most people say, fine, thank you, come again tomorrow, and I don't have time tomorrow either. So it's all about working on that. And then also, I think many times they have too high expectation compared to the output. So okay, well, I want, I'm just making up numbers, but okay, I want 100,000 or 500,000 euros. But if you look at it from your side, well, come on, I can only see the value of you of maybe 50,000 euros. I mean, so even there they start getting wrong. So it's also about thinking about what it means.
And how important is it to put on a number?
I think, why don't you just tell things up front and tell me, this is what I get, because then they don't disappoint anyone. Instead of, I see many clients also are working for now where we try to, okay, let's meet up and have a good chat and we chit chat. And then you have meeting 2, meeting 3, meeting 4, and finally meeting 5, you say, okay, this is what I want. And people are like, wow, okay, that was not what I expected. I thought something different. Yeah. I'm not saying, it's also nice to have a couple of meetings because that's also, it could also be a good approach to come in and say, okay, well, I'm here, I'm there. I would very much like to become partner with you. What would that take? Most company will take that as an invitation and be serious about it. But there's always a risk, because also, we live in a time where things are moving like this, So the guy who is brand manager or whatever, he had 1,000 other things, so he easily could forget that. And he's very nice to say, yeah, that's a great idea, and I'll come back to him in 2 weeks and then we'll discuss again. By the time he hasn't done anything about it. So it's about, again, I used to say, as an athlete or an organization who wants to sponsor, you need to create your toolbox. And that toolbox has to be ready to give to the sponsor, say, this is what I have. And he opened up, and there's almost everything in it. So he doesn't need to make a very much decision. He makes one decision, that is, whether he wants to get you on board, pay the money you're asking for or not. Yeah. Because there's so many different offers out there today, and fragmented, again, we're coming back to that. So there's no time for it. There's no people employed just only to be a sponsorship manager, for instance. They are everything else. Yeah. So you need to get their attention, and having attention is to make their life easy. Yeah. Because
you have to think of what does he have to do from here, this. Yeah. Who does he or she have to present it to? How does he or she sell it to the other people? Maybe. Yeah.
Because that's another, coming back to mistakes. I think there's one mistake many athletes does. They all say, okay, we have to go to the CEO because he's going to make the decision. It's true, and you can be lucky, but many times you can also be unlucky because the CEO has a good organization. He has his team he trusts very much. So if it comes down to a marketing manager, who's the one who actually had to live with it on a day-to-day basis, I signed a deal with Anja, by the way, and the marketing manager said, why didn't you tell me? I mean, why didn't you ask me to get involved? Yeah. So it works sometimes very negative. On the other hand, if you go to the marketing manager, then he needs to go to the CEO to convince the CEO. And there's nothing better for him to have a box of convincing tools which you are providing with, saying that's the reason why. Then it's easier for him. Yeah. And many times, athletes or organizations have not done that job properly. So that I think is very important in that aspect.
Yeah, because it's in a way it's the same dynamics as when you pitch a story to a newspaper or whatever. Yeah. That you want to see how you can make the journalist's life easier. Yeah.
Don't quote me on this on the camera, but most journalists are lazy. I mean, they are also not lazy, but they're comfortable. So you need to carve out the story, and then he will add his small comments and add things on it. That's the thing. And I've seen that many times also being involved in the media bit. The more you prepare yourself for that and give that to them, the easier it is, and the better story you get. Yeah. And that's the same with sponsorships, for sure. So, yeah. So how is the future with sponsorships? That is, for me, a very good question. I don't really have the right answer. The only thing I can see after being involved in almost 30 years of this business is that there's been surprisingly little development in the business, which I don't really understand why, because it is a big part of people's life, and it's also a big part of people's life to be contributing in terms of, I mean, people pay enormous amount of money to go and watch sport, see sport. So it should be relatively easy to try and look out how to come up with new ideas. That's, for me, is still very surprising. I think secondly, speaking of disruption, that's the big word, but it is actually also interesting in sponsorship, because I think there is there's a need to be much more disruptive, otherwise you will not survive in the long run. Coming back to our discussion about TV, many organizations still think it's great to have TV behind. It is, but TV channels are also suffering and they don't have the same amount of money anymore, so they'll cut. So everybody, including the IOC, UEFA, FIFA, whatever, they need to think out of the box, which they don't at the moment. It's a lazy way of doing marketing today. It's again about the 10 points on a paper, you put 1 million for each or even 100 million for each, and that's it. You need to find a way. The one who dare to do that, I think, will win in the longer term. But it's also to have the courage and the guts to do it, because it means loss of income for a time, and nobody really dares to do that at the moment. So we're all a little bit trapped in the same sort of like a bottleneck where we don't really want to move around. I think sponsorship will continue on, but I think also you see a change into a much more dynamic and be only a small part of a company's brand marketing. Whether it's athletes or big organizations, they need to find out how they can tap into that. And I still don't think they have done that really properly, so to speak. But again, like I said, particularly sports entertainment, I mean, we all get more and more time for that, and therefore I think there's many ways of doing sponsorship. You also need to understand how to do that. I think your own area is fantastic. I think you see more people joining into leisure or a mix of leisure and performance art, where you need to come out and live out your own dreams, and that is also, I think, an area for sponsorship to be involved in. So it's just finding that
the whole experience economy that and the selfie moments, right?
Selfie moments, and that will continue. I think that's and I think the world of sports somehow is still extremely conservative, very conservative, and I don't see why they should, because they, everybody from a small kid to old people lives through their sport and they love sport, so they should somehow be involved in that.
Maybe the poster child is Red Bull in experimenting with new.
I think Red Bull has done a fantastic job in both organizing all different events and marketing itself. But I think also a little comment on this is that it's also easy for Red Bull, no disrespect, but you have a one-man band, the owner who decides on what to do, and he does that, and he's passionate. When he is not there anymore, how do that look like? And that's the thing, you can really distinguish between corporations, like the one I was behind in my early days, where you have to take into consideration the budget all this time. Where again, private organizations or private owners has much more freedom to go out and say, okay, well, we do this and that. Maybe that's also a hint to athletes. Think about that, because corporations are really difficult, and it's their nature. I mean, I don't blame them, because they have they have a budget of X, let's say 100, but you need to find so many different marketing tools within that 100 budget. And I think, the days are over where you come out and say, okay, I want 80% of that 100. That's not going to happen anymore. So therefore, it's much more difficult. Whereas if you have a private person, he has a passion for cycling or whatever, and he can go all the way in.
I hope you're listening, because this is a good tip.
You need to research the background, understand the product, and what is the good storyline you want to tell. What is the story you want to tell? That's some of the things you should take away. That's important, regardless of it's the World Championship in ice hockey or it's individual ski sponsorship or sailing. It's the same. I'm often being asked that, particularly when I was at Carlsberg, people say, it's so easy for you to say you're successful because you have so much money and it's amazing. And that's where I tell this story about the Olympics, because Olympic sailing, because it's of course easier when you have a huge budget behind to do things, but sometimes it's also difficult, because what are you going to do next time? And I think it's not about money, or it's the same whether it's the World Championship in ice hockey or the Champions League or a small sponsorship. It's the same mechanism. It's just you scale it up, and it's more, but it's more or less basically the same. The thing with sponsorship, and that's maybe my insight, is that it is definitely not rocket science. It is extremely simple, because it's about people, it's about emotion. So don't make it more difficult than it is. It is not difficult. but it's difficult to find the hook and attachment to a particular sponsor. That's the challenge.
And that's where we can use people like you.
Hopefully, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
So,
taking
thank
us
you.
and showing us this place.
Yeah,
Where you,
it's,
this is where you go when you're off work.
This is where
Or
I
in the
go
morning,
most.
right?
Every morning I'm here because I love it if I'm not traveling. That's a fantastic place. I mean, and you hit a good day in Denmark. It's not very often, but it was great. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me to this little show.
All right.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, good to see you. Yeah.